Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
Colleagues, one of my bills that was unceremoniously killed this session, House Bill 2637, would have required K-12 schools to teach local history and politics. I firmly believe we cannot start incorporating state history into curriculum soon enough, evidenced by the staggering constitutional illiteracy coursing through House Bill Omnibus 2005. Unlike the U.S. Constitution, Oregon's Constitution begins with the Bill of Rights, which is far more expansive than the list of liberties explicitly protected at the federal level. Scholars debated for decades whether the Second Amendment defended personal gun rights or allowed citizens to maintain armaments for a militia that was ultimately replaced and institutionalized in the National Guard. The decision in D.C. versus Heller validated that the original intent of the founders was to ensure personal self-defense by allowing gun ownership. The Oregon Bill of Rights, however, is far more direct about the purpose of gun ownership. Article 1, Section 27 says, verbatim, "The people shall have the right to bear arms for the defense of themselves and the state." There's no ambiguity in that provision. Oregon's founders lived in a state far more threatened by war and violence than today. But Oregonians are still plagued by violent crime, and we owe our citizens at least the right to a fighting chance against a rapist or a mugger, as elected officials at all levels can call to defund the police. We know that the current version of House Bill 2005, originally intended to target possession of certain firearms, has incorporated House Bill 2006, which discriminates against Oregonians based on age, House Bill 2007, which pretends to empower local governments to blatantly violate Oregon's Bill of Rights. Last month, bipartisan attempts to unblock school safety bills were blocked in this chamber. House Republicans responded to gun violence by promoting common sense solutions that were not in conflict with the Second Amendment or Article 1, Section 27. House Bill 2005 is on the floor today, not with the intent of protecting populations vulnerable to violence, but padding political resumes. The initial provision of House Bill 2005...
Representative, I'm going to stop you there. The intent, you impugned the body when you said that the intent was to pad political resumes. Please speak to the contents of the bill, not to the intent of other members on the floor. That crossed a line. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The initial provision of House Bill 2005, intended to ban the possession of ghost guns, is justified in the preliminary staff measures summary by the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms report of a 30% illegal firearm recovery rate in California, not Oregon. There's no known epidemic of violence in Oregon driven by ghost guns. An individual's right to bear arms is dependent on the Constitution, not tertiary law regarding serial numbers, just as our right to speak freely is not tied to a free speech license. Another grievous infringement on Article 1, Section 27 is the arbitrary denial of the right to bear arms for adults under the age of 21. Members of the public less aware of the legislative process may favorably link this bill to the age of recent school shooting perpetrators and identify a yes vote as a courageous attempt to protect our children. I too do not agree with people shooting our children in schools, and I prefer that we have better security in our school systems. The real legislative fixes to protect Oregon schools were brought up for a vote on March 29th, and they did not move forward. Upon passage, this bill will disenfranchise Oregonians between the ages of 18 and 20 without constitutional justification. Exercising their express rights under Article 1, Section 27 will be punished with a year in jail and a $6,250 fine. We can imagine how popular it would be arbitrarily declare that free speech is no longer allowed for people between the ages of 65 and 67, or freedom of association for people between ages of 42 and 44. Many Oregonians are already struggling economically with catastrophic costs for health care, rent, and general living expenses. This bill is a warning to young Oregonians. Exercise your inalienable rights and face the specter of job-killing stint in jail, along with a fine that you will not be able to pay off in a labor environment unfriendly to criminal convictions. This would greatly affect my own college-age grandchildren who have been hunting since they were allowed to legally for deer, elk, pheasant, and many more. They all own guns for hunting purposes and have been trained to practice gun safety because they have been taught to be responsible young adults. The final part of House Bill 2005 takes advantage of conflicts in Oregon's legal system between the legislature and local governments. The principle of home rule is firmly established in the Oregon Constitution, just as firmly as the right to keep and bear arms. The hard work of many county commissioners and city councilors frequently validates the liberty to pass ordinances that make sense for their communities. But the Constitution enshrines rights that neither this body nor any other local elected authority in the state may nullify. We should defer to local governments as often as possible, so long as they obey the state's constitution. However, this bill purports to grant local government ability to prevent Oregonians from exercising their rights to defend themselves and their state of their proximity to a building they may not even know is publicly owned. Just as we cannot legislate a city's ability to overrule the Constitution's ban on quartering soldiers and conferring titles of nobility, we have no power whatsoever to allow City Council to prevent someone from possessing a concealed firearm in our or in adjacent to civic buildings. This bill seeks to punish law-abiding citizens for exercising their constitutional rights, a dangerous precedent for the many Oregonians whose lives and livelihood only protected by the Constitution. An individual whose sheriff has verified that they should possess a concealed carry license, but finds themselves adjacent to the administrative offices of that county with a ban in place, faces 364 days of imprisonment and that fine I spoke of earlier. I ask you all to name another constitutional right as so deserving of imprisonment and impoverishment. Should a city allow a man's child to be imprisoned because their father committed theft? Should a property owner be fined because they refused to quarter soldiers? Should a county imprison someone for incurring debt? The answer to all those is no, just as the answer to the question of allowing local governments to violate Section 27 is a no. This legislation is a clarion call to intensify dialogue with local government we represent and seek their input on actual local controls that they believe will allow them to better serve their citizens. I guarantee you that this process will not result in any local governments identifying provisions of the Constitution that they would like to see ignored or nullified in the name of ideology. Oregon's system for amending the Constitution is sufficient enough to address public safety concerns without suggesting that local government can lobby the legislature for permission to nullify our Constitution. Local governments are very well aware that nullification invites costly litigation, far more damaging than any desired benefit to public health and safety. The legislature is not empowered to simply ignore parts of the Constitution. We do not ignore laws we do not like. Every session, we submit bills to refer constitutional amendments to the people. Nothing prevented us from doing this with this bill. Infringements on Article 1, Section 27 strips women, people of color, and all Oregonians from all walks of life of the rights to defend themselves. I urge us to adhere to our Constitution and vote no on this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative.